Okay, welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Today we have someone, we're not going to talk too much about how to do pad slides with goalies, but we are going to talk about hockey goalies. Marie-Louise Levy Paez, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
This episode is brought to you by Scandlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products for the U.S. market. You can find us at scandlux.com.
Yeah, so we had a little fun conversation offline a little bit. So first of all, tell us where you're sitting, because you're in a little bit in darkness if you're watching the YouTube version of this.
Yeah, well, I am sitting in Italy. So it's like very late at night here and it's all dark because there's no light on the balcony. And it's like really, really hot inside. So you cannot be inside.
Yeah. And what are you doing in Italy? Tell everybody.
Okay, I have a background in track and field. So I'm here at the European Championship in track and field for masters. So it's just primarily for people who are over 35 years old. And we are all competing to become European champions in all the events of track and field.
Awesome. And I'm so appreciative of, that this is your preparation for tomorrow's event that you're going to jump on this podcast. We're going to add that in your training repertoire. Do something really weird.
Okay.
So today's topic is about, we want to talk about goalies. We want to talk about hockey goalies. And we want to talk about off-ice training, and you have a passion for that. And we connected both on, I think it was mainly where I found you. I connected that you had created either on Instagram or Facebook. I think it was Facebook, actually, a hockey goalie training group or something.
Yeah, I have a little community or training group or whatever we want to call it, but a little group on Facebook where I primarily post about mobility, because I think one of the biggest foundations in the goalie training is mobility. Mm-hmm. So I have like a weekly mobility exercise, and I have done that for like 1.5 years now. So a lot of mobility exercises there.
Yeah, and so one of my buddies, Tiber, we're going to talk about Tiber Nemeth, is connecting us, and it's one of Tiber's buddies, and is just one of the people that have liked your page and are watching. So Tiber was my beer league goalie here in the U.S., and so I'm glad that he's trying to get better.
It sounds good.
Yeah,
good.
and he has a son that plays in Prince Edward Island. He's not a goalie, but he's got a defenseman also. And we're all in the same boat here when it comes to, we love the game of hockey. We're always trying to learn about things that get better. And what you're talking about really here is, so I wrote down some bullet points in here. And so your site, or how we find you, is Forever Levy Goalie.
Yeah.
And Levy is Levy. So if someone's trying to find you, it's Forever Levy Goalie. But you're really not a hockey goalie.
No, I'm not.
And you've got.
I'm so far away of being a hockey goalie that anybody can be. But my son is a hockey goalie, and that's how I got into the world of hockey, actually, because he started to play. And today he plays junior 20 hockey in Gothenburg, a little town called Uddevalla. So somewhere in Sweden. Yeah.
But also a little bit of a unique background is that you're not totally Swedish.
No, I actually have a double citizenship. So I'm half Danish. I've lived 15 years in Sweden, so I think I'm Swedish about now. I think so. I consider myself Swedish.
Yeah. And we had a little offline discussion or educational moment where I talked to you about what a moss and kulla is from Dalarna. So anyway, the US audience that's going way too deep. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. But that's where we find you, Forever Levy Goalie, but I do think it's really interesting with your background, because I think it's unique. You know, when I'm thinking about track and field athletes, specifically sprinters, specifically hurdlers, I think of Sanna and Jenny Kallur from Falun in Dalarna. And I can't remember, you know, they're twins and they were best in the world at one time. And I think one of them still has the indoor world record, if I'm not mistaken, in the 60-meter hurdles.
I think you're right. I'm not actually quite sure, but I think you're right.
But here's what comes to my mind when I think of them is not just incredible competitors, but incredible athletes and very explosive athletes. And here's the correlation to hockey is explosion and power and speed. And I think that there's correlation between, you know, training to be a hurdler and training to be a hockey player.
Yeah, I believe so too. And actually that's why I think my background in track and field is so unique, or what we can call it exciting, because in track and field, we know how to build athletes. Whether you're gonna throw something, or you're gonna sprint fast, or you're gonna jump or something, we know how to build athletes. And a goalie today is more athletic than like 10 or 15 years ago, where it was just, you have to be big and you just have to be in the goal and take up as much space as possible. Now you really have to be athletic and being able to move from point A to point B extremely fast and extremely explosive, because the game has changed and the game is faster now. And
the other part about this, like when you talk to a lot of coaches about goalies, and when you talk to a lot about scouts and general managers about goalies, what they say is, and this is a unfortunate thing, and what they say is, I don't know anything about goalies. And it's unfortunate. And I can, when I coached youth hockey and I was a head coach, I didn't know anything about goalies. I really don't know how to coach a goalie. So the specialization is certainly important. So the other points I wrote down here was kind of the topics or the things that you had mentioned that you're passionate about, and that's strength, flexibility, speed, endurance, and coordination. Right. And which is things that, whether you're a skater or a goalie, you know, those are things that are super, super important. And the off ice improvement of that is crucial for goalie and player. So
regardless.
So the other part that I wanted to talk to you about, and we can incorporate this, so I'm going to lead you a little bit here, and that is, you mentioned kind of how to develop a strategy and how to look at the gaps in strength and weaknesses, and specifically in those areas. So help me understand, when you meet a new athlete, maybe this is correlating with your track and field training. How do you, because we had some other people on, for example, Derek Simpson, who's talking about the functional mobility screen, which is something that the NHL is using as a baseline to determine a lot about mobility. But how do you, when you meet someone new that says, oh, you know, I want to improve my performance, but how do you determine someone's strength and weaknesses from a, let's look at these components: strength, flexibility, speed, endurance, and coordination?
That was a big question.
Yes.
But okay, I have two different ways of looking at it, because I work with goalies and players on site. So I work with people here in Sweden, or not here because I'm in Italy, but in Sweden. And then I work with some online. And when I have people on site, it's easier to see them, because then I invite them out to the track and field arena, and they run and they jump and they do all these kinds of things that I want to see. How do they do this? How do they jump on one leg? How do they run a sprint? How do they do a sit-up? How do they do all different kinds of exercises that we will have in the program later on? How do they lift weights and all these kind of stuff? And then we go through them, and then I scale it down, and then we go back to basics, and then we learn from basics, moving on, progressing as they get better.
So where do you see the biggest problems?
I see for actually both for goalies but also for players, that they need to learn how to sprint, basically, because if you can sprint really fast, you can also be really explosive, and you can put it in jumping. So many of those I have worked with have had to learn how to jump and how to sprint, and when they learn that, they become really fast.
And how does how does that translate into on ice performance?
I'm working with a goalie right now. His name is Trevor Babin. He's from the USA. So I'm working with him online. And for him, it was like when we talked about, okay, you have to do like this. You have to have your knees, your toes pointing up to your knees when you jump and when you run and stuff like this. And then on ice, he has been able to transfer that, what's called, not emotion, that motion. So okay, if I think my toes are pointing up to my knees, I will be able to push faster from the pole. So that's how he's going to be able to move it on to the ice. And then we have like lots of exercises that is scaled down into an analysis of what he is doing or what a goalie is doing. So I have looked at many goalies, many games, watched many goalies play, watched many goalies practice, and then I have scaled it down. Okay, what are they doing? What do they need to be strong at? And then putting it on the individual. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how and if we break it down into the full body of a goalie, and we're looking at so since we're talking about junior hockey here, so we're really talking about the kid coming out of post-puberty, and into young adulthood. Some of them may not have ever gotten any kind of instructions off ice or often not on ice. Some have gotten really bad. What body parts do you see that have, so when you're looking at the things you talked about there with mobility and flexibility, what body parts do you see are problem areas?
Well, actually, as to today's junior hockey goalies and also many players, they are really not bad. They are in bad shape, and I think it's also because we don't. When you and I were kids, we were more outside, playing in the yards, running around, climbing in trees, and being like more outside. And today's youth, very still, they sit a lot in front of the screen in school and so on. So they don't have like good mobility or good strength growing up. And when the problems, I think, is that they are really bad coordinated and really stiff.
Okay.
And if you want to be a good goalie, you have to be good coordinated and you have to be mobile. And I'm not talking about passive stretching, but like the dynamic stretching and being able to move your body in in the most free and best motion range of motion you can have.
Okay. So is it fixable?
I think so.
Okay.
It's never too late.
Okay.
Just look at me. It's never too late.
Okay. So, which is awesome, right? I mean, and certainly genetics and talent and all that kind of stuff comes in, but we're given the body that we're given the genetics that we have. That's not necessarily in your control. So if you're a goalie, you can't fix that. But what you can fix is, so if for whatever reason you realize that at age 15 and is that a good time to start thinking about this? Or
I actually, I teach at the regional federation here in Sweden in hockey in Skåne. And in Skåne, and we actually just talked about this, and I think, to all coaches, not just goalie coaches, to all coaches that has some kind of youth or junior hockey, they should start working on mobility as early on as possible. And that will make it more, it will be paying it forward. So when they become older, they will have better circumstances to doing what they want to do. Because they are good and mobile and they can move, because so many can't really do the motion right.
So I would imagine too that you're a fan of the multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
Which I would imagine would certainly improve mobility and flexibility if you are not just concentrating on the same body part all the time 12 months of the year.
And back to what you said before about which body part is the most problematic area. Actually, I think you have the possibility to work with your whole body, as long as your legs and arms and head are on straight as it's supposed to be. You have the possibility to work with it. But juniors often have they are in a hurry because they want it all done yesterday. And that's the biggest problem I see, is that they don't understand it takes time.
Yeah.
If you want to do something, it takes time. And that's, so, yeah.
So this is why you're going straight into where I want to go. And that is, you had talked about kind of the strategy. And when I think of strategy, I think of goals. I think of plans. I think of action, and I think more from a process standpoint. Is that kind of, you're in the same mindset?
Yeah, definitely.
And
I always it's like you say, off ice is really is a lot of work with the body, of course, but it's also with the mind. So I believe it's very important to have goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, and some kind of action plan, so you know what to do to reach those goals. So you don't just, well, I want to do this, I want to be in the NHL, but how are you going to get there?
So when you're talking to that 18-year-old, let's say the junior player, or take your son's age as an example. Let's not use your son, because I've got a son as well, and you're better off coaching another player than your own son. But let's say you're talking to your son's teammates, and when you pose the thing about, like you said, goals, your response is spot on. You're going to get a lot of, well, I want to play in the NHL. But when you're talking about the specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and timely, the SMART goals, so to speak, they don't necessarily know. They've never been taught how to think about short-term, medium, long-term goals. No. When you have those conversations, when you're talking about off ice, give me some pointers on what are some of the conversations you have to challenge them to be thinking about? What are reasonable, or what are some goals that, if they don't know how to establish that, what do you suggest?
Well, it's actually it's a conversation that takes place during the coach doing our sessions, and it's like I can ask them, okay, what do you want? What is your goal with all this? What are you working for?
Yeah.
And then they can say, okay, we can actually take my son, because it's a funny thing, because he mentioned something about it the other day. And when he was very young, he was like 10, I think, he said, well, I want to play in the NHL one day. I said, okay, but how are you going to do that? And then we made a plan together. So we had a big paper, and then he made a tree, and there were stairs on this tree, and then on each step he got to write or draw, because he was very young, what was the next step. So like, then he said, okay, I'm gonna play in the senior team when I'm a junior. Step one, I'm gonna, and then he had like his plan all the way to the NHL. Funny plan. And now he is turning 18, and now he actually, last week, he told me, do you remember the plan I made? Because he just got his junior contract in the senior team. So he actually made the first step on his plan, even though he made this plan when he was 10 years old. So now he is starting to understand, okay, I need to work with my actions, and my action steps can be, I'm not strong enough. Okay, well, how do we work with your strength? Okay, I'm not mobile enough. How do we work with your mobility? Or like another player, goalie I had, he had a back pain all the time. Okay, but can we work with your body so you will get rid of the back pain and have a great mobility and become stronger, and then you will get closer to your goal. So it's always trying to keep, many ways lead to Rome. So it's almost like this, and then the goal is there. So
but I think that your point is spot on when it comes to, you can't just say, well, it's not a real goal to say I'm going to make it into an NHL. Well, so you peel the onion, right? So you get the next layer, and they say, well, okay, how am I going to get there? Okay, well, I'm going to do this, and then you say, well, okay, well, how am I going to get there?
Yeah.
And do you break it down into those kind of categories of, I mean, in order to be able to go and play at those levels, you have to become better. You have to become a better player.
Basically.
And in order to get to be a good player, you have to have certain kind of characteristics. And those components that you mentioned, strength, flexibility, speed, endurance, coordination, are key components for an athlete.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Regardless if you're a hurdler or a goalie or a skater.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me ask you about the numerical value. So when you're talking about strength, right? What is important to you? Because I've heard this many times from people that says, well, you need to be able to hang clean X amount, or you need to be able to squat X amount. And to me, it's a little bit of the old school thinking of comparative analysis. Well, I am used to what it takes at this level is this. This equates to strength. When I say that, what comes to your mind?
Well, I'm very much for the individual. So we all have some kind of, like you say, some kind of test value. We want people, some kind of box we want them to fit in, because if you can do this or you can do that, you can do this. But I actually look very much at the person, because if the person can improve in their off-ice training and get the right technique, because maybe it is not, maybe they can be strong as hell, but they have like the baddest technique ever. And then correction, if we do the correction of the technique, they will become even stronger.
Okay.
So for me, it's always about how do you do the movements? How is your technique in every movement? And it doesn't matter if it's a squat or if you're running or if you're doing a sit up. How are you doing it? So that is why I don't really want to work in groups, because that's too many people at one time. But I want to work with the individual, because then we can go into the detail, and then into the detail, and then into the detail of the detail, and that's where performance comes.
So, are you familiar with Joachim Tenander?
Yes.
Okay, so he was on episode 54.
Yes.
And he speaks that language.
Yes.
And we were talking.
I know him.
Yes. Now, and we were
Yep.
talking about. We talked a lot about muscular MAT, or the activation technique, but we also talked about that part about how your body's built, and you know, there's a reason why we have a bicep and a tricep. We have a hamstring and a you know, you have activation and you have contraction and relaxation. So very similar mindset. Yeah. So all right, now we have two people I've found two people with similar things, but we
actually live in the same town also. We also work with the same team. So yeah.
It's awesome. But are what you guys are talking about, do you find that being still fairly foreign?
Yes.
Why is that?
Okay, this is my own philosophy, but I think that hockey still is so traditional. So when you look at what they do in practice, I'm just talking about off ice. I have no idea what they do on ice. I know that has changed, but off ice, it's very the same as it was 15 years ago. And we don't have the game or the playing set like we had those years ago. It has evolved. It is a lot faster game, like we talked about, and it's like the training programs or the coaches that do the training with the teams don't have the knowledge, and they don't actually, I sometimes feel like they don't care. So it's like we're just gonna do what we know, so we're just gonna keep going this way, and we will not listen to anybody else. That's so that's my feeling. Oh my God, I'm saying bad stuff now. No.
No. I mean, that's the reason why I'm asking, because I think on this podcast, we can speak freely, and we can really, this is really individuals' opinions, and some people embrace it and some people don't, which I think is great. But you bring up a really important part, and that is, so back when I was coaching a group of players, so let's say, you know, this was youth hockey in the US, so we didn't have a 25 players, right?
Yeah.
We had 15.
Yeah.
But 15, it was me and an assistant coach, and we had a lack of knowledge. We did the best we could, but we also had limited time and resources. So we reverted back to group training.
Yeah.
Right? Because because we didn't have individual. I didn't have time to spend time working on this guy, and this guy individually. So we did some things together. But maybe that's okay for a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you're talking about is, if you really want to take it to another level, take your son as an example. He's not going to optimize his effectiveness and efficiency in his training if he's doing the same thing as everybody else.
No.
And I would imagine that his build is very different than the
Oh
guy next
yeah.
to him.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And his deficits and strengths are not the same as the guy next to him either.
No.
So how do you adapt? The unfortunate thing, though, is that most junior teams have similar problems because they've got a time slot of on ice, and then you have a time slot of off ice. How do you, so if you're working with a team, how do you individualize a plan within the collective time?
When you have a team with 25 players, I think it's the best possibility. The best option is to try and categorize. So you often have like 4 or 5 guys that has the same issue with mobility, and 4 or 5 guys that has about the same problem with strength or whatever. And you have smaller groups in the group. And that is how I would recommend you focus when you have like a team. Divide it into smaller groups. It's the same way how you want to develop it on ice. If you have someone that's really good at skating, or you have someone that's really good at puck handling. Okay, they need to train on different areas. It's the same in the off ice. Make it into smaller groups, because then it will be easier, and then it will be easier to move around later on.
How do you measure the gains? Because you could have a plan.
Yeah.
You have a strategy, you have a plan, and now we're working that for the first week, and then we got week 2, and then we got week 3. And how do we measure the improvements, the gains that the player is having, and make adjustments as we go? Do you measure that on not just he's able to lift more, or he is, or do you categorize that into improved flexibility? How? Improved mobility? How? See what I'm
saying? When it comes to the game, and if we're talking about the goalie, so when I look at the goalie I have coached or worked with, and I see him or her playing the game, and it's more like it's their feeling, and it's very hard to measure because it's a feeling that they have on the ice in the situation, but it's also a feedback from their coaches, because their on ice coaches, if we can call them that, or their goalie coaches, if they have that, can often see, okay, something happened. I don't know what it was, but I can see you are moving faster in this situation. I can see you're having more saves, or you're better core. You have this save, you didn't have that save yet last year. So it's more like actually a feedback from the on ice coaches and the goalies or the players themselves. If I have worked with players, it's a back to the analysis, or what I have seen when I have seen them on the ice before. So it's a combination of a lot of things. I don't have like a schedule that I just check. It's not boxes that I check off. This is people, and everybody is an individual, even if we're in a team. So it's really the individual you look at, and you analyze, and you screen them, and I can see if him or her goalie or player is having a good game or a bad game, and then afterwards we can have a talk about how was that. And I don't talk with them about how many saves they made or how many goals they scored, or we talk about how was the feeling in your body. If we have worked a lot with the hip area, okay, how does it feel? How do you feel around the hip area? Is this hip motion faster now than it was before? So it's kind of difficult to measure, because it's an individual feeling.
So let me ask you this: what is your opinion of the training journal?
I think training journal is fantastic.
Okay, When you
because
go explain.
because it's a directly feedback to you, to yourself. I have, okay, if I have a good training journal, I have a direct feedback to myself on how this week was, how did I feel this week, and that will probably tell me why I got the result I got.
So how do you take your player or the person that you're training, that is, do a lot of people do you find a lot of players that are using a journal?
Not enough.
Okay.
I always, the people I work with, I always recommend it. But again, I always say to the people I work with, I'm just a tool. You have to do the work. I can give you all the tips in the world. I can give you all the guidance in the world. But if you don't do anything, it's not going to be worth anything.
What are some ways then that you can explain to that player of how are we going to use this tool? So you have the training plan that says, okay, we're going to have 3 on ice and 3 off ice sessions plus the games this week. And it's going to be broken down into the quantifiable parts and then the qualifiable parts of what we're going to do within that time.
Yeah.
You're not going to talk to them every day.
Oh.
Perhaps. But at the end of the week, how do you use that tool with the player?
If I sit with the player, we look at it. You go back, and if you can see, okay, you were sick this week. Okay, maybe this is why you got the result you got. But this week you had like one day where you've had bad back, or one day where you had a headache, and so it's like adding the week to a whole, and just going through that. And when you have done this a couple of times or many times, and you have like, okay, now we have like 3 months of work, you can see how the results is progressing, or maybe also why nothing is happening. So I think it's a really great tool, and if you do it consistently, and if you work with people over a long period of time, then you can look at it. Okay, last year we did this and this and this. This year we have to change that and that, because to get to where you want to go.
How does sleep and fuel or the diet factor into that in the training journal specifically? Do you have them fill that out?
It depends on what level they are on. Was that a good answer? No.
All right.
I always
give me the example of the higher achieving athlete. Let's say the person that is maybe moving out of juniors into adult semi-professional.
I don't want them to write down what they eat, because it can become an issue. But we always talk about, what do you eat? How often do you eat? Do you take any kind of supplements? Because when you go from the junior and into the senior, it's often something they wonder about. Do I need to take extra protein, or do I need to take extra creatine, or something like that? So we talk about stuff like that. But I promise you, I can always see if they eat right. Because if they eat right, if they get a lot of protein, if they get the carbs they have to, and all these things, they will progress in their training. Yeah. If they don't, they will not have a good progression as they could.
Yeah.
And sleep, I'm for sleep. Rest is important. Yeah. I always say, train hard, rest hard. And that's like cue for me, do that. So everybody I work with knows they have to rest. Yeah. It's important.
Well, I think that it's this little tool, it's interesting working with that young adult that isn't, for us, like I grew up, my dad had a journal that he wrote down I mean, he didn't think it wasn't the journal, it wasn't the diary. Hello, my diary. It was very pragmatic, and it was more what did he do that day? But
Yeah.
he kept for all of his professional years, he had, and that was his Christmas present every year, was he got a new journal for next year. But
Yeah.
it was easy to buy him a Christmas gift. But I
Yeah.
think that, you know, it's one of these simple techniques that maybe the 18-year-old doesn't think is very sexy, or you're not going to find any, you're not going to find any Instagram videos on
how to journal.
how to journal.
No,
right?
No. Yeah.
So,
well, I haven't seen any.
but I do find this an interesting topic and a very important tool that
Yeah.
because when you, and it's about optimizing your team.
Yeah.
You're not, it's the accountability when you have an athlete, a trainer, and a coach, and maybe an advisor.
Yeah.
So if you have that dynamic of those four players or four people, well, okay, I as the athlete, I may know what I did, but I have no way of quantifying it or qualifying it and to share it.
No, exactly.
And therefore, if I'm going to optimize my coach, my trainer, and my advisor, if I'm not achieving the results that I want to achieve, how am I? They're not going to be able to look into my brain to know what adjustments I need to make.
No, and if they get a training program, they could get a training program from me, and it says like you have to do 60% of your one rep max, and then it was like, okay, but what was 60% this week?
Yes.
Will it increase till next week, or will it be increased next year? We need to know these things to see the progression. And I, in my career as a hurdler, I have done like track and field for 30 years and probably 20 years journaling. So I can go back and see what I did like 5 years ago. What results did I have? What weights did I lift? What runs did I do? Okay, I had my best season in 2016. Okay, what did I train in that season? How can I replicate that now? That is why it's so important. You have the background information. And if you get an injury, okay, how did we work the way back to getting into the shape you were in before you got the injury? Because sometimes we get injured.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's for your own sake.
Yeah, I think that's a big takeaway of this fun conversation. So I know that you got a game. You got a game tomorrow. You have
I don't.
It's called a track meet
tomorrow.
You have a meet tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure you get your sleep in, and hopefully we haven't gotten your mind to go completely crazy from this conversation. A couple of things before we end.
Yeah.
You are meeting yourself at age 17.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give yourself? Now you're a couple of years older.
Yeah.
And you look back and the experiences that you have, but the things you didn't know when you were 17 that you know now that you wish you could tell yourself then, what would it be? What your own advisor looking back?
Never doubt yourself. Awesome. Never. You can do whatever you want. And that is my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think that is such good advice. I want to tell people to look you up on Instagram. You have a lot of beautiful pictures, but you also your passion for kind of the master athlete. You post a lot of videos and pictures of the 90-year-old athlete.
Yeah.
That to me, that's what came to my mind when you said you know it's overcoming those things, right? it's not always the 20-year-old that is going to be making the NHL, but it may be the NHL for the 90-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So go to Marie-Louise Levy on Instagram, and you'll find a lot of stuff. Last thing, we have a partnership with Target Aid. So Target Aid is a fundraising organization, a platform, and it's really in the second year for me here doing this podcast. How can I do my part through social, the social welfare, so to speak? How can I highlight? So one of the initiatives that we have is the club or the organization of your that is closest to your heart.
Yeah.
So, klubben I mitt hjärta. What is the club or the organization in your heart? It doesn't have to be hockey, could be any. But if you were to say, this is the jersey I have on my wall, which
this is the jersey I have on. Well, good question. Because it's a really good question, because I actually, this is embarrassing to say, because I don't follow sport. I actually don't watch that much sport, but I always have been a fan of Frölunda. So that would probably be the jersey I had on my wall if I had to hang up anyone.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we will we're going to set up Frölunda as an organization underneath Swedish hockey, Swedish junior hockey podcast on our Target Aid site. And then what we're going to do is Target Aid will do all that work for us. And then we have the ability to share and say, Marie-Louise, klubben I mitt hjärta is Frölunda. And then we can help them with spreading the news. And everybody has, this is the club in my heart. And hopefully we can spread the social good out there as well. Thank you for coming on, the complete stranger. Now you know what a moss and is.
Yes.
And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kick some ass tomorrow and take no prisoners.
Exactly.
And we'll stay in touch for sure.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.